You know, when you hear the name Michael Jackson, you don't just think of a singer, you think of a moment, a sound, a stage that feels bigger than reality itself, but then you also think of something else, questions, and that's exactly where The Verdict comes in. A documentary that claims to show answers, but somehow leaves you with even more questions. And today, we are not here to repeat what you already saw. We are here to talk about something else, what it didn't show you. Part 1. The story behind the story. Let's be honest for a second. Every documentary, every film, every retelling of real events has one silent truth behind it. It is always a version of reality, not reality itself. And when it comes to Michael Jackson, that difference becomes extremely important, because this wasn't just a celebrity story, it was global, it was emotional, and it was heavily judged long before any documentary even existed. Part 2. What The Verdict focused on. The Verdict mainly focuses on the courtroom narrative, the allegations, the investigations, the legal arguments, the public reactions. And yes, those are important. But here's the thing. What a documentary chooses to focus on is just as important as what it chooses to skip. And sometimes what's missing changes everything. Part 3. The first missing piece, context. One thing the documentary doesn't fully explore is context. Not just what happened, but how the world was reacting at that time. Because Michael Jackson wasn't just facing legal pressure, he was facing something bigger. Media pressure, public imagination, and a level of fame that most people can't even comprehend. Imagine this. Every movement you make, every decision, every relationship being analyzed by millions of people in real time. That's not normal life, that's pressure on another level. Part 4. Media power. Another thing that often gets underplayed is the role of media. Because media doesn't just report stories, it shapes them, it repeats them. And over time, repetition starts sounding like truth. And in Michael Jackson's case, his image was constantly evolving in public perception, from genius to mystery to controversy to headline. And once a narrative locks in, it becomes very difficult to break it, even with facts. Part 5. The human behind the icon. Something else that The Verdict doesn't deeply explore is Michael Jackson as a human being. Not the performer, not the icon, just the person. Because fame at that level does something strange. It removes privacy, it removes normality, and slowly it removes identity. At some point, you are no longer seen as a person. You become a symbol, and symbols don't get treated like humans, they get judged like ideas. Part 6. Public opinion versus courtroom reality. One of the biggest gaps in many documentaries is this, the difference between legal process and public perception. A courtroom follows rules, evidence, procedures, standards of proof. But public opinion, it doesn't follow rules, it follows emotion. It follows headlines, it follows what sounds convincing, not always what is proven. And that gap is where most confusion is born. Part 7. What gets left out? Now here's the uncomfortable part. Every documentary has limits, time limits, legal limits, narrative limits, and sometimes editorial limits. That means not every detail makes it in. Not every perspective is shown, and not every voice is heard equally. So when you watch something like The Verdict, you are not seeing everything. You are seeing a structured version of events, carefully selected, carefully edited, carefully presented. Part 8. The Internet Aftermath. After documentaries like this release, something interesting always happens. The internet splits. One side says this confirms everything, the other side says this is incomplete, and then comes the third group, the curious ones, the ones who start searching what was not shown, what was left out, what's the other side of this story. And that curiosity is what keeps this topic alive. Part 9. Why Michael Jackson? Story is different. There are many celebrity cases in history, but Michael Jackson is different for one reason. Scale. His fame wasn't national, it was global. His music wasn't just popular, it was cultural. So when controversy enters a story that big, it doesn't stay limited to facts. It becomes emotional history, and emotional history is always complicated. Part 10. A difficult question. Here's a question that doesn't have an easy answer. When someone becomes that famous, do we still judge them as a human, or do we judge them as a symbol created by the world around them? Because those two things are not the same, not even close. Final part. What you should really take from it. So when people say, what The Verdict didn't show you, it's not about exposing hidden footage, It's about understanding limitation. Every story has boundaries, every documentary has direction, and every narrative has a missing side. And maybe, just maybe, the real truth is not in one version, but in understanding that there are always more layers than what we are shown.